Welcome to Fool's Gold with Cara Cordoni. The views and opinions expressed on Fool's Gold do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, its host, or its producers. Any content provided by our guests, contributors, or authors represents their own opinions and experiences and is not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, or entity. Welcome, everybody, to Fool's Gold, Spiritual Seeking, Coercion, and the Right Use of Power. Today, we have Ellie Wilde as our guest. She has 11 years of experience with the International School of Temple Arts as a participant, as a facilitator, and then as someone who left and has spoken up about the harms she experienced and that she's seen systematically in the organization. And so today we're going to go through a 5-act arc, so to speak, so we can really track your journey. Um, Ellie is a writer and an artist and a men's sexuality coach, and is here to share her journey. So I thought we would start with um, yeah, what was going on when you found ISTA? Where it was happening?
Um, yeah. Thanks for having me here today, Cara. Yeah, when I cast my mind back to that 40-year-old um, person that I was back then, I was really at rock bottom with regards to relationships. I'd done a lot of spiritual kind of seeking and lots of different kinds of sort of personal empowerment journeys, but I'd never really explored sexuality. And I specifically felt quite lost in my relationships in regard to that world.
Mm.
So I was really kind of looking for something that would help me do sex and relationships better in a more empowered way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so ISTA seemed to offer that. And what was it like when you first found ISTA? And yeah.
Well, I remember my first impression when once we'd all sat down and we were in circle, and I remember listening to people share about why they were there. And, there was psychologists, there was people that were lawyers, there was like, businessmen and kind of, and also people on the spiritual path who seemed to be kind of quite advanced and stuff. So it was the first time I'd sat in a group of people in a personal development kind of program where I felt like, oh, I have to kind of like stretch myself a little to be here. And I really enjoyed that. I really liked
Mm.
that. And so, when it got round to my turn to share, and everyone else seemed to be already working with people in some way, and I was just like, I just want to learn how to have better sex. I kind of felt like a little bit uh, not dumb, but what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like these people are all kind of coaches and
Ah.
facilitators already. So that was my first impression. Yeah. And it was exciting for me
Mm.
because I wanted to grow and I wanted to, um, yeah, I wanted to be someone that was kind of, yeah, kind of being more masterful in that part of my life.
Yeah, and it really felt like, or there were parts of it that did empower you. I'm imagining else, you wouldn't have kept going back. So there was really
Mm,
a lot that it offered for a while, it sounds like.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I'd done lots of other sort of healing modalities, lots of other healing work. But I never quite fitted into the sort of yogi, love and light kind of mung bean eating world. Like I was always a little bit badass, and I kind of like had this kind of rock star and then yogi, and I'd kind of bounce between the two. And suddenly I found this environment where they could coexist, and
Yeah.
I could be a sort of mixture of the yogi rock star, and I didn't have to, I didn't have to sort of fit into this love and light. Like, there was like these people were sexual healers, and that was pretty rad in my, in my opinion, because I'd never come across healers, but I'd never come across sexual healers. So I felt like I'd kind of, in a strange way, straight away, I sort of felt like I'd come home.
Mm, yeah. And so then how did facilitation come up? What was the journey there?
Well, the first training was very much about my experience and my own healing. And, um, you know, it was really clear pretty early on that the facilitators themselves were also in the mix with us, um, as kind of places to sort of explore with, and kind of, including our sexuality. And like and it was sort of pitched at us as well, the facilitator, we're all going to focus on ourselves to start off with our own sexuality, but then we're going to open the field, and then we all engage with one another and practice our naming our desires and going after what we wanted and receiving rejection. That was all part of it, but the facilitators were in the mix for this, and I got some attention from the facilitators. And so, um, I very quickly, by the time the second training came around, but even before that, I very quickly came wrapped up in this world where I found myself in this kind of inner circle of facilitators and their world, and, having sexual relationships with them, having relationships with them. Um, and I was kind of just swept into that space. And I'm not saying that that was the only reason that I ended up in the facilitation path, but
Mm,
they kind of like saw things in me that no one had named before, and
mhm.
I guess kind of encouraged me to walk that path. And I started off more giving sessions one on one, and then I was organizing trainings and things. It took a little while for me to step into the facilitation role, but yeah,
So
I was in the inner circle straight away.
okay, yeah, and so the agreement that ISTA had was facilitators and students or participants, let's say, could interact sexually, and that's what
Hmm.
you were referring to, and yeah, that you were right in the middle of all the juicy, amazing, exciting, hot, um, center of what felt like a family or a movement, uh, belonging.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think especially with regards to one particular leader in the organization who everybody seemed to idolize. I came to realize, he took a particular interest in me, and sort of, in a way, was kind of mentoring me to lean more into my strengths. And we started a sexual relationship as well. And um, I don't know whether you call it grooming, but I'm sorry, I've forgotten the
Yeah,
question. I've gone
uh,
completely off track.
that's alright. All the little things connecting in our brains. Um, I think what you were thinking about, was were those interactions, if not grooming, what was the nature of the influence maybe that created? Because there's power dynamics, there's,
Mm,
you know, age, sometimes there's kind of a glamour around
mm,
a lot. I know that when I went to my first ISTA, I was like, "Wow, these people on the couch are awesome." The facilitators were
mm,
sitting on a couch at the end of the circle, and
mm,
I was like, "They travel the world, they're healing the world, by reducing sexual shame, and they're, kind of, like, fabulous." And that
mm,
was attractive. it had an
Mhm.
impact and influence on me, I know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was part of it, definitely. But I think the other piece that seemed really interesting was once I started to experience these sexual rituals, which involve either, self pleasuring or the one of them is called Sacred Spot, which is an ancient tantric ritual where you pair up with somebody and the person is kind of like honoring your body and going towards your sacred spot, which is for a woman, it is inside the yoni in the G spot, and in the man, it's in the anus. So, and then we're doing this in a group setting, and, what I actually experienced was, like, quite a lot of visuals, imagery, and changes in my body sensation, and kind of memories of past lives, and images of me in red robes in dusty lands that look like Egypt, and sort of, like, getting really captivated by, these strange
Mm.
sensations that were happening in my body, and kind of people telling me things about, like one experience was being initiated by this woman and having her flick her sacred amrita into my face and tell me I was an ancient priestess of Isis. And, like there was a lot of, perhaps there's truth in that. Perhaps I was in a previous life, like a sexual era. I've no doubt about that. My life, that could be true. I definitely kind of am someone who seems to be advocating for a more healthy and conscious and perhaps even sacred sexuality. So that it's like there was truth in what was happening, and on top of that, there was a lot of abuse of power and coercion and kind of funny dynamics and that as well that sort of also came into the picture.
Yeah, when did you start noticing those patterns, or how did that show up for you?
I mean, pretty early on, but my at the time I wasn't really, so much has been um scientifically we've kind of know so much more about the nervous system now, and especially like, publicly it's more known about the nervous system now than it was back, in the early 2011 this was. But I realized that I was kind of fawning or kind of like not able to find my voice and slightly intimidated by some of these men. And, you know, I noticed it in our sexual interactions, for instance, or when I wanted to speak up about something, but I didn't really feel like I had the courage to sort of go against the status quo. I noticed all of that, but I didn't really understand that it was because of the power dynamic
Uh,
and what was happening to my nervous system. Whereas knowing what I know, I've learned in the last 5 years, I think I would have been able to name it and say, hey, like I'm in a response because of the power dynamic, and I just want to speak into that. This is what's
mhm,
happening for me.
mhm.
Yeah.
How would that have gone over, do you think? Because I'm imagining you did speak up at different times.
Yeah, I did speak up eventually about certain things. But yeah, for a long time there, I was kind of quite quiet.
Mm.
Although there probably are people that disagree with that because, I mean, I was really triggered by one facilitator in particular. And at the time, I was living in a retreat center with my partner, and we were organizing the trainings, and they were coming to ISTA, and I was going to have 3 ISTA trainings like in my house.
Mm.
So, and one of the facilitators I wasn't comfortable with. So
Mm.
I decided to pull the venue on the ISTA trainings and say, look, we can't do it. I don't want to do it. So I did have my reservations about certain facilitators, and that created a big stink, because I am a bit of a mischief maker. I am someone that fawns and is complicit and doesn't speak up. And also, I'm also someone that does speak out sometimes as well, especially if I feel um, I have enough people in it. I don't know what it is. There's just
Support,
sometimes when I
maybe?
just
Or
can't. Maybe,
mm,
maybe. Um, But anyway, those trainings did go ahead because I had a conversation with that facilitator. But yeah, I
Yeah.
did find my voice eventually, and at certain times. It took a while.
Hmm. Yeah. And so we talked a little bit about becoming a facilitator. Um, and yeah, when you were doing that, how was that for you?
I mean, there's parts to it that was so like a dream job, You're kind of like traveling the world and you're in groups of people with people who are really, really cool people that just want the world to be a better place. They're really wanting to go into all of their stuff and, like uh, the environment in ISTA is always really, it's hard work sometimes, but there's always an element of fun and it's very social. And, there was so much of that job that was really, really fed my soul. And, I think that was why I stayed so long because of the feeling of belonging and community, even though I could feel sort of things weren't really 100% for me. But there was something else that I really wanted to say here. Um, I've kind of it's gone blank.
Yeah.
Can
We
you
were
cut
talking
the
about
spit out?
yes, we can. Um, yeah, the question about facilitation and what went well
Mm.
and
And what were we talking about just before that?
um facilitation, that's all I've got.
Mm.
uh yeah, my thread.
It doesn't matter. I lost the thread of it. Never mind.
Yeah, we'll see if it comes back. Um yeah, so in our act 2, I guess, like, what is it that you want people to know about facilitation or your experiences?
Mm. Mm. Um, there's so much of it that feels like I got a lot personally from, um, like, there's something really good about the work that is very powerful, even the intensity of it to a certain degree, and the fact that it's done in community. Um, and it's revolutionary and it's such a privilege to be able to hold those spaces for people, and the people coming are so earnest and, in my experience. And I just, yeah, I do feel really sad that, you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, um, not everything that happened there was wrong and bad. And it is an incredibly beautiful impulse behind it all, which is to sort of like bring more freedom and love and help people feel more in their power. But I think, yeah, the power's power's really intoxicating. I've just had a small taste of it as an ISTA facilitator, but it totally did a number on me for a while there. Yeah, I did believe that I was kind of something special, and like I felt like I was channeling the divine, and felt like I had um, wisdom to share, and I felt like I had these incredible gifts that perhaps other people didn't have, and and this was just reinforced because I was sitting on a couch and everyone else was sitting on the ground, and I could kind of come back home to New Zealand and snap my fingers and have 25 people in a workshop. And I didn't even kind of sometimes even put out what I was doing. People just came to see me. And when you go sort of from no particular like intense training or kind of apprenticeship into that, like with no mentoring,
Right.
and you see that how perhaps that could become a little bit problematic. And um, so, yeah, I think one of the things I feel a little bit ashamed about is I did let it go to my head a little bit and eat. And it wasn't like I was agreeing with everything that was happening in ISTA. Especially, if I'm really honest, I thought that some of the male facilitators had sex with too many people. I was convinced that the way we were having interactions with participants was okay at the time because I drank the Kool-Aid, and ISTA's kind of stance on that is that it happens in other organizations. We're just going to be open about it. And it's not happening in the shadows. We're kind of being honest and upfront about it. Although we're not actually, in retrospect, we're not being upfront and honest about it. It's not telling the whole group. We're just telling each other behind the scenes what we're doing, which always confused me a little bit. But I never said anything for some reason. I'm not sure why I didn't say anything, but and I think sometimes I did try and say things like that, but it was almost like it didn't get heard. And it sort of whistles by and then the subject gets changed. And yeah, that was interesting once that had happened a few times. And I was somebody who I had two really long term relationships that developed out of people I met through ISTA. One was an assistant that came, and the other one was a participant. And so I was somebody who benefited from that um, rule. I had two very long term relationships that happened. Um, So yeah, I mean, that's some of what it was like to be an ISTA facilitator and what was gravitating about it.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and then let's see. What at the time, like, did you feel like the covering issues of consent and boundaries and empowering people that, yeah, how did you think that was working from your experience facilitating?
There was a lot of agreements that put the responsibility back on the participants to have their own backs and to
Mm,
be self responsible, to take responsibility for the nature of their experience, that everything that happens in the training from the start to the finishing circle is part of the experience. So, it's kind of like whatever's happening, it's all like a reflection of you. Even if someone's being an arsehole to you, like it's a reflection, it's a mirror for something in you. So, um, that that's a problem because already it's not really enabling people to really speak up so much if they're not understanding something or if they're not really feeling well supported. Or I mean, also there was a um, agreements that if you need anything, you got to make clear requests, and don't sort of like hint at stuff. And then there was an agreement that if you feel like someone needs support, have a look at what's happening inside of you instead of passing them the tissues, like leave them alone. So all of these things kind of are problematic because I mean, creating a container or an experience that feels safe enough where people feel resourced enough and um, they've got the layers of support that they need to go into some of this really edgy territory. Like those agreements, for starters, like set up like a can of worms that could go badly wrong for many people and probably do, but probably most people don't even speak up. Um, so that for itself was problematic. And I never really, I used to hate that part of the training when we were reading out those agreements. Like even way back, I kind of felt like something was off there, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then once I learned more about right use of power, I realized that, with power comes responsibility, and those in positions of power needed to take more responsibility, and we weren't. So there's that.
Mm.
And then there's also, we did the Wheel of Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. We practiced giving and receiving touch for a very, one morning.
Looking at ISTA as a system of both, like, the actual teachings or the trainings, but then there's
Hmm.
also kind of the dynamics of the inner circle and then the outer circles.
Hmm.
Um, I'm wondering, yeah, how that worked.
Yeah, the first time I saw the inner circle clearly was when I was on the outside of it.
Okay. And when did that happen or start? Yeah, how did that come
I
to
mean,
be?
it started when I decided to finish my sexual relationship with Bruce. Um, because I had a boyfriend and I wanted to be more monogamous with that boyfriend. And the next time I was at the training, and yeah, Bruce was there, and there was, you know, a bunch of women that were sort of surrounding Bruce, and there's sort of the chosen sort of other guys that were in the training that were kind of cool. And I just remember one of the evenings being like, wow, like there's a definite clicky group happening there. And I was kind of with the not cool kids, and I was, with some of the participants. And I think I was assisting or organizing on that training at the time. But I just remember how icky it felt. And I was like, oh my God, like that was me. I was in that inner circle before. And now I'm out here. And when I was in it, I didn't see it.
Right.
And I actually, yeah, I was actually kind of horrified. Like, and I felt really sorry for some of the participants that just, I really saw how many there were that weren't really getting any attention or
Mm.
any kind of like, they weren't getting the same level of support as, say, the more attractive women or the slimmer women or
Mm.
the younger women. And, that was a red flag. That was definitely a red flag. And there were red flags earlier on, but it was a bit like, when you get into a relationship with someone, and you've kind of already slept with them, and you kind of are really looking into their potential and kind of good things about them, um, and the red flags are just sailing by, but you're just so kind of invested in the goodness of the thing, of a person, that like the red flags just kind of like sailed by. And
Mm.
that's what it kind of felt like a little bit. Yeah, and that was definitely one of the red flags.
Yeah, it's a little bit like falling in love and having a honeymoon
Mm.
period, and
Mhm.
I know when I left my first ISTA, I was, just, delighted and lit up and a little hypomanic
Mhm.
um, and it feels really good, it's really exciting, and I think
Mhm.
the false sense of intimacy is a red flag in terms of, like, we go really deep really fast, um, but where I was gonna go is that, like, so many relationships, like you said, we collect the red flags, and as Janja Lalich says,
Mhm.
we put them on a shelf, right? All the things we collect in the back of our mind, they're on a shelf, and then something happens and the shelf breaks, and
Mhm.
we're confronted with, "Oh, these are all the things I kind of had set aside." So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you had a shelf breaking moment or
I think it was more, I think he's right, he's come back with the key. I think it was more, I mean, it happened over a long period of time. Um, um, there wasn't kind of one thing that happened until later on, much later on. But what was happening for me over a long period of time was I noticed that I was only really like, I was never really both feet all the way in. And the way I knew that was, like we'd have these core gatherings that would happen every 18 months, and you had to fly to like Brazil or Greece or whatever. And, when you got there, everything was all paid for, but you still had to get yourself there. And I couldn't quite prioritize that expense, being a single mum
Mm,
and kind of. Whereas I think if I was someone that was all the way in, I would have made it happen. Like I would have got there and I would have got on that plane and I would have made sure I was in there in amongst it
mhm,
all. And, and that was a big thing in ISTA. It was like being at the core and being in the core of it, and everyone wanted to be really in. And like and it was all about the relationships I had with the leads and kind of like how many trainings you were getting. And I was just sort of, I think it's part of my nature to just kind of be a little bit back, a bit reserved. Maybe it's my Britishness, I don't know. I was never like the one diving into the middle of the cuddle puddle, put it this way. I was like always, I had one foot out of the cuddle
yeah.
puddle. I'd be in it, but I was kind of like one foot out, like, um, and that's just how I am. And I wasn't trying to prove. I didn't get into the politics, and I wasn't trying to prove myself in the organization. And I still got a lot of work. Like, um, I didn't need to be sleeping with all of the leads to get work. I didn't need to be having sex with everybody. I didn't want to have sex with everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Initially, I was having sex with quite a few tantric facilitators, not just ISTA, but other people as well, because it was also new and wild and crazy. And I was in this like place of like liberation around my sexuality. So the early part of my journey, I was like that, but I wasn't doing it to get work. Like I was doing it because it was a hell of fun. Like, I had a lot of fun and I was exploring and yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
So, there wasn't really that one moment that the shelf broke, but there was an
Well,
accumulation, yeah?
yeah, yeah. And it was in 2019 at a particular training with Rex McCann where I could feel it building up between us, like a little kind of derogatory comment towards us and kind of slapping me on the thigh and telling me to. I had this whole thing about vibrating your body and you had to be really alive and kind of juicy and kind of as a woman, you needed to be sort of quite overtly sexual and, kind of, I don't know, breathing and that's just not really me. Like, and I was just sitting on the couch and I was very present with what was happening in the room. And he kept slapping my thigh and he's like, come on, vibrate your body. Like, and looking at him and then there was another moment where I was on the microphone and he decided it was a good time to test the microphone and he was turning the microphone on and off and I was trying to lead the group for a process and I was kind of looking at him, what are you doing? And then there was another time on that training where we were, a little bit of a muddle with the numbers for the sacred spot and we were trying to sort out how many people there were and the pairings and everything. And I had it in my head and I went to say what I thought and he told me to shut the fuck up in front of the whole team. And that was like, okay, that's enough now. And yeah, I was deeply hurt and deeply offended that he could speak to me like that in front of the whole team. And it didn't stop there. It proceeded to continue to get worse on the
Uh,
training where he was derogatory. towards me in front of everybody, not the participants, but definitely the team. And then it created a bit of a, um, there's a mutiny in the team, and some of the female assistants were saying, "We don't like the way you're talking to Ellie." And then I was taken to one side by him and said, "You're causing a problem in the team now, and you need to go to the team and tell them that everything's cool between us, um, and nobody needs to worry about it." But the truth was, I was being severely gaslit and shut down. And every time I tried to defend myself and say that his behavior towards me was unacceptable and I couldn't work in this kind of environment, it was all turned around on me and my trauma and my issues with the masculine and la la la. So that training for me was the start of my exit from ISTA. And he proceeded over the next couple of years, and then COVID hit, and then we couldn't leave New Zealand, and the only place I could teach was in New Zealand, and he was the only teacher that was teaching here, and he'd ring me up, and he'd like, "Have you penetrated through your trauma yet?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm actually still really angry." And his solution to trying to resolve it was for us to get our bodies together. And I was like, my body wants to be like as far away from you as it can possibly be. And that just didn't fly with him. He wanted me to submit, really, I think, and to just kind of make it all okay. And I wasn't going to do that, because I couldn't. I just didn't actually know how to just stuff it all back down for the sake of being able to teach on a training. And so then I began to get sort of iced out of New Zealand and teaching here. Um, and it was a really difficult time because, especially during COVID, when many of us were feeling really isolated. And one of the trainings this went on for 2 years. And one of the trainings that happened here was after all the lockdowns. And it was literally like every single one of my friends at that training in a community that I'd helped to found here in New Zealand. And I wasn't there, I wasn't included. And
Wow.
yeah, I just kind of retreated into my cave and began to mourn the loss
Mm.
of that community. And Rex said to me, "If you don't sort this out, it's going to chew you up and spit you out." And then that's what it did. It spat me out.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a a great model for consent and care and relationality and
No, no,
empowerment, submission, and is not, yeah, female empowerment, and I think that
no.
ISTA does have that rather flipped upside down, um,
Mm.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think, like, the thing is that's always really tricky with this stuff. Like, there was a grain of truth in what he was saying to me
Mhm.
because I'm somebody who had a difficult relationship with my father and felt really criticized by him. So I was sensitive to Rex's criticism. However, that doesn't mean that that's where it stops. Like, he also played a part in being like a bit of an asshole and talking to me in a really derogatory way. And given like the way women have been treated, like, especially because he was in a position of power, like, like, I think somebody in a position of power, like older and kind of hopefully wiser, could have recognized, hey, yeah, I could have behaved a bit better there, and I'm really sorry.
Mhm.
But he just couldn't meet me as a human. There's one point in our conversation where I asked if he would just breathe with me and feel one thing that's happening in his body and just name it. And he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't be an equal with me. He wouldn't be a human with me.
Mm.
So there was no space for reconciliation. And I think that that is a systemic problem in ISTA, like an inability to um, be relational. And there are many people in positions of power with yeah, poor relational skills, and many people in positions of like less power just fawning and kind of like tolerating, and because they don't want to upset the status quo because they want to advance themselves in the organization. So, and there's no support for facilitators. There's no sort of rules around engagement with facilitators. You know, if we say we're not supposed to be sleeping with participants, then I don't think leads should be sleeping with facilitators or organizers either, or
Right.
apprentices, because there's still a power dynamic there as well. And when it comes, like, I lost so much income. Like, I went from earning 90,000 New Zealand dollars a year to zero over COVID because all of my income came from ISTA trainings. And then I had to try and, build my business up again, which I'd largely walked away from because I was getting so much work with ISTA. So there was financial loss. There was, yeah, lost community and friendships. There was like a lot of trauma activated, and also, like it was spiritual kind of soul kind of loss as well. And then it coincided with menopause. So
Wow.
it was a perfect storm, really, for and burnout. It was great. Having a great time.
So yeah, the ostracism, I mean, that's like shunning, right? Like you
Mm,
were
mm.
iced out and what yeah, how does a community come apart like that? I guess I'm like what's your understanding of why more relationships didn't last, I guess, through not being a facilitator?
Well, there's also another layer to it, particularly in New Zealand, which is um, the mystery school called Haydn, because when Haydn came to New Zealand, which is where the ISTA trainings began to happen, like before Haydn, the ISTA trainings happened in other retreat centres
Okay.
all over New Zealand. And it was more kind of, it wasn't kind of in a hub or a place. But then
Okay.
once Haydn came, that's where the ISTA trainings started to happen. And that's where the temple trainings happened as well. And what I noticed was Haydn started to influence ISTA, and Bruce started to influence the ISTA community. And it kind of all became a little bit mesh. And when you've got one charismatic leader like Bruce, and a place and a community around him, and a body of teachings, which are kind of his teachings, like, and people wearing fucking mandalas, and them all walking around dressing the same and spouting his kind of teachings, like, that's a cult.
Right.
um, and so that cult started to have a really big impact on the ISTA community that was a little bit culty, but not like really bad. Because, I mean, when I ran the Eden Festival here, we had people from sexological bodywork, we had people from the kink community, we even had some of the Love and Light gang, and people that just kind of like meditated with the heart. Like it was a mixing pot of all of these different kind of um, ways of being in a body and experiencing our evolution and growth. And it included sexuality, but that wasn't all of it. Like, and it was like, it was a really beautiful start to something here in New Zealand. And yeah, I was absolutely heartbroken when Haydn came in and kind of like a big clumpy size 11
Mm.
feet just kind of squashed everything that was here before.
Wow. And so, ISTA's trainings are a week long. You mentioned the temple training,
Mm,
at Haydn. That's a separate training, and it's 6 weeks
mm,
long. But
mm.
part of what I had noticed is that there seemed to be assistants in particular that came to ISTA trainings that had been to Haydn, and so
Mhm,
they were often, touting that if you're really in, if you really are gonna be a sacred goddess, and if you're really committed, then you go
Mm.
to hide it.
Yeah, Haydn was like the finishing school, really, or the kind of like elite kind of place that only the chosen ones were going to, I suppose. And if you did, it was kind of like became like a bit of a status thing that if you'd done Haydn, and also there's this like you do a temple training, but then you come back and support in the outer field. And um, yeah, I mean, I never kind of, God, like I never managed to jump into that. I stayed on the outside of it. I mean, initially because every single ISTA facilitator around the world was being asked to come and help at Hyden, in some kind of role. And I'm like, meanwhile, here in New Zealand, and Bruce didn't ask me. And, all he wanted was he wanted to put me as the kind of, he did try and kind of give me a role, but it was more like, how many people have you got on your database, and kind of, can you help kind of with the community side of things? I think he was talking about customers actually rather than community, but he wanted me for my that influence that I had in the country at the time, but he didn't actually want me in a role of any power in that, you know, experiment that he's doing there. And given, that I developed quite a big community in here in New Zealand, together with others, but I was definitely a leader of that organization, of that community. And so, yeah, it was really interesting that he just kept inviting lots of different other ISTA facilitators, and there was no invitation extended towards me. In fact, the first ISTA training that they had at Haydn, there was Des and Bruce on the facilitation team, and for ages there was just this mystery circle on the poster, and it was like, "Oh, who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be?" Uh, and I was like talking to Bruce, like, Can I come, like, teach, or what's happening?" And he's like sending me to Des, and Des was like, "Oh, go and ask Bruce." And then
Oh,
Bruce is sending Des, and they were both sending me to each other. Neither one of them could say to me, "It's not you, like, we're getting someone
oh,
else." And then they bring a facilitator in, which is Bruce's wife, who wasn't even an ISTA facilitator. And I was just like, this is just they're just doing what the fuck they want.
uh,
Like, it doesn't matter that I've kind of like helped found the New Zealand ISTA community here, and I've been doing this for what, by then probably about 7 or 8 years. Traipsing around the pavements, putting flyers up at festivals, talking about stuff when no one had ever heard about this
mm,
stuff. And I mean, now ISTA trainings in New Zealand, everywhere you go, they've heard about them, and I was a big part of ushering that in here into New Zealand, like, and to not be recognized for that, and not be kind of, yeah, it's like not like I need a medal or anything, but it's just to be treated with some kind of level of respect for all of the hard work and the
yeah.
outcomes that I've achieved. Um,
Yeah, it's a bit wanting you for your connections and your ability to put butts in seats, and it's a less about care for you, it seems, and that's a pattern I've heard
mm,
from other people at ISTA. Um, Even on the path to becoming a facilitator, how many people can you
mm,
bring? Then you're more attractive to get into the pipeline and things, so
mm.
I think it is systemic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've also even been told, as a facilitator by Rex, that one of the reasons he used to like having me on the team was because I look good. And he couldn't understand why I was offended by that. Like, I've done
Well,
so much training. I've got so much experience with people. Yeah, you want to focus on the fact that I look good. All right, great.
yeah, I mean, there's a
Thanks.
lot of kind of double lip service or hypocrisy. Again, it's Um, yeah. How do you look? Are you sexy? Versus the whole person and all your expertise and your kindness and your hard work.
Yeah, I mean, it just reeks of misogyny to me and kind of like devaluing as like a woman, like, that it's an awful thing if women are just kind of perceived, just objectified and kind of like that you are like your outer packaging and it's not who you actually are inside that's important, that matters. And, when you're teaching human evolution and growth and we're wanting to inspire people into more of their love and freedom and power, and yet you're going around saying stuff like that, like, it's just disappointing and embarrassing, and I don't really want to be hanging around with those people, let alone working with them.
Yeah. So where are you now in like your relationship, I guess, with ISTA and Haydn? What's the journey been since leaving?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it happened in stages, but I became someone that was speaking out publicly about some of the things I'd experienced and some of the things I felt were wrong. And I, officially left ISTA in early 2022, um, just before all the complaints came out, funnily enough. I mean, I'd kind of left in 2020, really, but officially I left in early 2022. Um, and then it took me some time to realize that I actually couldn't be friends with people that were heavily involved in Haydn or Ista because it just was too painful because their experience was very different to mine. And I felt like my I wasn't able to have my experience that I had with the organizations of ISTA and Haydn, even though my experience with Haydn was only from the outside, but it
Mhm.
was still really intense. Um, because I kept trying to be there and I kept kind of not being able to jump in because they kept telling me I need to come surrendered and everything. And so I was watching everyone just flock to it and not going.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, once I realized, no, this isn't for me, like 100%, I began to also cut ties with all of the people that I'd known for the last 10 years, some of them even 12 years. That I'd known through these 2 places, and yeah, went back to ground zero, starting from scratch with a couple of friends that I still had that weren't involved, and thankfully had a dog and had my art and, um, took some time to repair.
Yeah. What
Mm.
is there anything we haven't covered in the journey that you wanted to highlight?
I think what's been really empowering for me is actually staying with this process of keep bringing my voice in and keep like not shrinking back into the background, actually being courageous enough to speak out and to share my voice, however that looks. And I think it's a really powerful piece for survivors too that feel like that have been harmed to claim their voice and to really share their experience and to when they feel ready and strong to, because that feels like it's part of the empowerment and part of the healing, to just to not shut down. I guess it gets you out of that sort of collapse freeze response and into something that feels more mobilized and moving forward. And that's definitely what I've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years, is like more of a forward momentum again, which feels great, and more owning more of who I am and feeling like I haven't made a mistake of being in that cult or leaving the cult, or I haven't left my soul family. Like there is a future that's waiting for me that feels um, unknown still in many ways, but also kind of right somehow, like deep in my core and in what where the place in me that I experience as soul, it's like this really strong backbone that is very steady and proud of me and kind of that has my back,
Mm.
And if we can't, there's the beautiful poem. I think it's something about, yeah, the journey towards yourself. Yeah, and so many times in my life I've betrayed myself, and I've not actually really followed myself or been true to myself. And this has been a time in my life where I have really backed
Mm.
myself and I did really turn towards myself and I didn't shut myself down and I did follow what I felt was my truth. And even though it was scary, and even though I felt really alone, and even though I turned away from largely everyone I knew, like it was right. It was right for me. And yeah, I feel kind of proud of that, and even though I don't know exactly where I'm going, I'm kind of trusting that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there, like, 1 or 2 things that you think would be of use to the audience? We have survivors, we have people who are just hearing about this for the first time.
Oh,
Um, yeah, is there, like, a thing or 2 that you really hope they'll think about or take with them?
don't have sex with your boss.
It's not worth it.
um, hmm, yeah, like I think a big one for me is like when I got like an elevated level of self importance when I worked within ISTA. But underneath that was this core wound of like I didn't matter and I
Mhm.
needed to prove my importance in order to sort of be in the world. And I think somehow going through that whole wound of like it coming out and feeling like my voice didn't matter and I didn't matter and I'm not important and I'm kind of irrelevant and and um and then finding that place in myself of being able to really feel that I do matter and actually I matter very much, even if it's just to me, and to know that that place of in that space of feeling like I don't matter, there's like a lot of potential for growth because yeah, when I was in that sort of pseudo important kind of place, like I wasn't really growing. In fact, I was stagnating,
Yeah.
and because it was covering up like in insecurity in me that really felt like she didn't actually feel relevant or
Mm.
matter, which is a soul wound. It's like, like an existential wound. And, in the end, I mean, I don't think we need to chase after having those experiences. But it was in some ways like a gift for my soul's evolution and growth, even though it wasn't easy to know. Yeah, to connect with that part of myself and really feel it, and then from that place begin to build foundations of
Mhm.
repair and um, take slow steps towards developing more structure in my life, more resource, more support, and to really like, yeah, not just tell myself I matter, to actually put things into place in my life that's showing myself I matter,
Mm.
prioritizing my own needs, prioritizing like my financial well-being and my emotional well-being, and cutting ties with relationships that weren't good for me, and um,
Yeah.
letting go of work that wasn't good for me. And like that's a really important life lesson. And yeah, like I'm grateful that I could walk that path with myself, and I've had some wonderful support and some wonderful kind of therapy and coaching as well.
Yeah, it takes a lot of support to go through, well, recovery from a cult. It's a lot
Mm,
to take apart what's yours and
mm,
what do we leave? Like you said, it's not really just black and white, and that makes it hard too. There's actually nuance, and so there's
mm,
subtleties, I think, that we all have to sort through, and that takes time. But just
yeah.
to go back to your main point, I don't know if you saw Jane Goodall had left a message to us all, and um, to be played after she died, and her main
Mm,
message was, "You matter. You
mm,
matter, and you're here for a reason, and you may
mm,
find that, and you may not, and it doesn't matter because you matter."
mm.
And
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
think that's like balm for that wound that drives a lot of us, in a
Mm,
disconnected
mm,
culture
mhm,
and under stress and capitalism.
mm,
It's like
mm.
that's a really tender place to hold
Yeah,
that we matter.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also like a spiral, isn't it? It's not like a linear process, like so we'll spiral around it again and again and again. And I like what you just said there about it being nuanced, like repairing and recovering from being in an abusive spiritual community or being in a cult or even being in a organization or a job where there was abuse of power and kind of all your friends were there or whatever. And then some of the things I've had to wrestle with is kind of the victim where I felt harmed, but also, you know, the times where I know I wasn't someone who supported victims as well. So there's, that journey that I've been on as well of like recognizing where my blind spots were, where I didn't actually kind of show out how I wanted to show up in the world and what I've learned from that and what I need to do to you know, make that better and to be more responsible. If I ever am in positions of power again, like
Mhm.
how I can mitigate those things happening. And, I think it's kind of good when you're in a position of power to sort of fail and to be humbled. Um, then I think you're actually a bit more trustworthy with power because you've kind of learned the lessons of it a bit more.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that's the case with me anyway.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so
Mm.
much, Ellie, for being on this first season, for trusting me and now our audience with your story. And I imagine that we'll have additional conversations in the future. So I look forward to having you
Yeah.
back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and talking to me today, Cara.
Yay. All right.
Yeah.
That's it for today's episode. And I hope you turn in next week. I don't know. Tune in for the next episode. All right. This episode was recorded at Access Humboldt and produced by Paxton Scarberry, Shanti Chakravarti, and John Friedman. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.